So once again, it's a schus, a privilege to be with you. And I've said this so many times, but I just can't skip it. Because whenever I come on to the Shir, it really is a privilege to teach Torah thousands of miles away, sitting at home, and you are already familiar with the setting behind my back. So the first few weeks I was sitting in another place with a picture of the Kloisenberger Rebbe behind me, and what we see behind my back now is Hoidul Hashem ki toiv ki li yolam chazdoi. And every time I sit down in my seat, before I sit down, I see that sign, Ili pinu moloi shiru kayom, ein anu maspikim lahoidois. And we should quote this posuk 1,000 times a day. Hoidul Hashem ki toiv ki li yolam chazdoi. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu should keep on being with us. We should have good health, and we should be able to continue to teach Torah. B'simcha v'betuv levav. So this coming Friday is Asarah B'Tevis, and the only one of the Dalet Tevis that ever falls on Friday is Asarah B'Tevis. There aren't many halachas regarding Asarah B'Tevis shechal be'erev Shabbos, because yes, it is a full tzayim. The only different halacha is the Mishnah Brura. Asarah B'Tevis falls on Shabbos, you could go to the mikveh and you could wash up l'kovet Shabbos. There is no chumrah, even a midas chasidus in rechitza. So the topic of today's shir is a theoretical one, not nogea l'maisa. Asarah B'Tevis shechal b'Shabbos. Dalet soimes are different neviim. The posuk in Novi Zechariyahu. Tzoyim haravi v'tzoyim hachamishi, tzoyim hashvi v'tzoyim hasiri. Yiyu lebeis Yisrael lesosoyin ulesimcha ulemoyadim toivim. So the context of Dalet Soimis is actually a positive context, not a negative context. That is the posuk in Zechariah. But Asarah B'Tevis is mentioned once again in Novi, and that is in the Novi Yecheskel, Perek Chav Dalet. And this posuk is in a negative connotation, not in a positive one. In Yecheskel Chav Dalet, the Novi says, Ben Adam, K'soiv l'chu Hashem hayoim, es etzem hayoim hazeh. Somach melech bovel al Yerushalayim be'etzem hayoim hazeh. Abu Darham writes an amazing chiddush, and the Beis Yosef quotes him as Siman Tov Kuf Nun. Because regarding Asarah B'Tevis, the pasuk says be'etzem hayoim hazeh, if Asarah B'Tevis falls on Shabbos, or b'yemei kedem, all the tzoymis could fall on Shabbos if we're Mekadosh al pi hariyah. All the other tzoymis, Tisha B'Av, Shavuos B'Tammuz, Tzoyim Gedaliyahu, if they fall on Shabbos, they are nidcha la'achar Shabbos. Asarah B'Tevis can't be nidcha, because the pasuk says be'etzem hayoim hazeh, like Yom Kippur. By Yom Kippur, etzem hayoim hazeh, Yom Kippur isn't nidcha, neither is Asarah B'Tevis. And when the Beis Yosef, as we see it on our screen, amazing technology, the Beis Yosef comments, V'lo yodati menayin lo zeh. Lo yodati menayin lo zeh. How does he know? Which is an interesting style, an interesting way to ask Kedushin, how do you know? How do I know? I made it up. That is what I think. Be'etzem hayoim hazeh. So when Abu Darham writes, Etzem hayoim hazeh b'Asarah B'Tevis kamoi etzem hayoim hazeh b'Yom Kippur, does he mean Gzerah Shova? Of course not. Of course not. P'sochim samach vav. And this is a very pushet assumption. Of all the Yud Gimel Midrash HaTorah and Dreshes Vem, only a Kal V'chomer Odom Dan Miyatzmoi. Ein Odom Dan Gzerah Shova Miyatzmoi. There are no Gzerah Shovas besides the one that we find in Shas. And this is something we don't find in Shas. So obviously, the kavanah of Abu Darham is a svara, not a gzeira shova. but rather a svara. Just like Yom Kippur can be nidcha, same applies to Asarah b'tevis, because the pasuk says, be'etzem hayom hazeh. However, one would argue, ein hanidin doim l'raya klal uchlal. Etzem hayom hazeh b'Yom Kippur refers to the halachas of Yom Kippur, to the tanis, to the tzoim. Ta'anu es nafshu seichem be'etzem hayom hazeh. Be'etzem hayom hazeh, the Navi Yecheskel doesn't refer to the tzoim, but to the siege. Let's read the pasuk again. Ben odem k'soiv lecha es shem hayom. Es etzem hayom hazeh somach melech bovel el Yerushalayim. So the pasuk isn't referring to the tzoim. Only the pasuk in Zechariah deals with the tanis. The pasuk in Yecheskel doesn't deal with tanis at all. The pasuk in Yecheskel just tells the story, the tragic story of Asarah b'tevis. It is when the siege was put on Yerushalayim. Maybe the kavanah of Abu Dharam is, the pasuk says twice, be'etzem hayom hazeh. Look at the screen. K'soiv lecha es shem hayom, es etzem hayom hazeh, somach melech bovel el Yerushalayim, be'etzem hayom hazeh. So maybe the fact that the pasuk stresses twice be'etzem hayom hazeh, that would indicate, can it be nidche, just like Yom Kippur? But still, there's room to argue, ein hanidin doim l'raya. B'savara ein hanidin doim l'raya, because Yom Kippur is min haTorah. So Yom Kippur cannot be moved. Just like Pesach can be moved, and Sukkot can be moved, and Shabbos can be moved. But Asarah b'tevis, after all, is not min haTorah. It's divrei Kabbalah. But we would assume, and we will come back to that towards the end of today's shir, we would assume that the Nevi'im, when they were metaken the tzaimis, they instituted the mitzvah of dalet tzaimis, zecher l'chor mabayis, they had to bear in mind, knowing that, well, statistically, sometimes any of these 4 fast days will fall on Shabbos. And what are we supposed to do then? Because there are only 7 days in a week, and there are 4 different fast days. Still, by basic statistical understanding, sometimes any of these 4 fast days will fall on Shabbos. So probably the Nevi'im in their day and age took that into account, and they were metaken. We can't move Shabbos, but we could move Dalet Tzaimis, and that is why they should be nidche. So why would Asarah b'tevis be an exception? It's interesting. The Beis Yosef's only comment when he brings Abu Darham is, Lo yodati zo menayin lo. How does he know? Why doesn't the Beis Yosef argue against the Abu Darham? It goes against Rashi, it goes against the Rambam, it goes against other Rishonim. So on one hand, Abu Darham is a Rishon. He's entitled to have his own opinions. But on the other hand, the Abu Darham is one of the later Rishonim. It definitely would be a huge kasha on the Abu Darham to go against Rashi. Rosh HaMedabrim b'chol mokoim. Rashi was first and foremost amongst the Rishonim. The greatest Bali HaTosfos were his Talmidim and all the others. Rashi is first and foremost of Rishonim Ashkenaz, and the Rambam is first and foremost among Rishonim Sfarad. And this Abu Darham clearly goes against Rashi. Rashi Megillah Daf Hey Amud Aleph clearly says, and Rashi specifies, Shabbos B'Tammuz and Asarah b'tevis, if they fall on Shabbos, they're nidcha after Shabbos. And it's also mefurish in the Rambam. Perek Hey Halacha Hey Mehilchos Taniyos. It's not only Rashi and the Rambam. The Meiri in Megillah Daf Hey Amud Aleph, well, I would definitely not ask a kasha on the Abu Darham from the Meiri, because the Meiri wasn't available in the days of the Abu Darham. The Meiri is a recent discovery. None of the great Achronim had the Meiri. The very first Meiri to be published is on Masechet Shabbos, and that goes back almost 200 years. But all the others, only in our day and age. But it also goes against Kolbo, Hilchas Tisha B'Av, Maharil Hilchas Shavos Betamis. So the Kolbo and the Maharil they were great Rishonim. But the Abu Darham is entitled to have a different opinion. It's a chiddush that the Abu Darham would go against the Rambam and Rashi, as I mentioned before. But the Beis Yosef doesn't quote any of the other Rishonim, and his only question on the Abu Darham is, Menayinai. So the Abu Darham seemed to be a chiddush in the eyes of the Beis Yosef. And the chiddush is, why would we be mechadish a new halacha, which goes against all the other tzomos, which are nidche to after Shabbos, based on a pasuk? It's not a drosh of Chazal. Definitely isn't the Gzera Shove, as I explained. So the Abu Darham seems to be a chiddush in the eyes of the Beis Yosef. And the Beis Yosef wonders, why would you say so? So I said, the Abu Darham goes against 5 Rishonim, the 2 giants, the greatest, Rashi and the Rambam. Maril, Kolbo, Meiri. He also was against the Ibn Ezra. Where's the Ibn Ezra? Well, there is no Ibn Ezra on Shas. But this is neither an Ibn Ezra ala Torah. Zmiras Shabbos. So Zmiras Leil Shabbos, we have Ki Eshmoro Shabbos. I think it's Shalashudis, not Leil Shabbos. And one posuk, one line in Ki Eshmoro Shabbos. Al Kain lehis anes boy al pina voinov asur levad meyoim kippur avoini. So Ibn Ezra, in a very famous Zemer, the Ibn Ezra was a Paitan. He was he wrote Piyutim, like many of the early Rishonei Sfarad. He was a Meshoirer. And in this Zemer, he writes, Shabbos, Lis Ares Boy Alpina Voina Vasur. So the only day in which we could fast on Shabbos is Yom Kippur. And obviously that excludes Asarah B'Tevis. So all the Achronim understood the Abu Darham. If Asarah B'Tevis falls on Shabbos, all the other tzeimis, even Tisha B'Av, are pushed aside, are nidche to after Shabbos. Asarah B'Tevis can be nidche, and therefore we fast on Shabbos. Is this relevant halacha l'maisa? Well, probably not, because Asarah B'Tevis cannot fall on Shabbos. Since we're not Makadosh al Piriyah, Asarah B'Tevis is the only tzom, the only tanis that falls on Erev Shabbos. It is the only tanis that never falls on Shabbos. The Machne Chaim was a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer. And it is a Sefer that sometimes I quote, not very frequently, but I quote him. Shuvas Machne Chaim, it was a gewaltige Chadschen. He had a son that wrote a Sefer Toras Chaim. Many Sforim have the same name. There are many Toras Chaim. The son of the Machne Chaim in Toras Chaim writes, quoting in the name of his great father, that we learn from the Abu Darham that Asarah B'Tevis is Chomor Mishar Yemei Hatzam. And one should be very machmir in Asarah B'Tevis. If according to Abu Darham it overrides Shabbos, that just proves what a Tanis Chomor it is. And the Toras Chaim writes, my great father, in his elderly years, didn't fast Dalet Soimis. He was old and ill and feeble, but he did fast Asarah B'Tevis. And this to me is a Pele Godel. Pele Godel, because nowhere do we find in Poskim that Asarah B'Tevis is Chomet Fei Mishavos Tamas, or Tzoim Gedalia. And if the Abu Darham means to say that Asarah B'Tevis is Chomer, we would expect him to say it clearly, loudly, in his own sprach, in his own language. That is not the way to teach us a halacha that Asarah B'Tevis is Chomer. Theoretically, the Yemei HaMikdash, it would fall on Shabbos, it wouldn't be nitchit to after Shabbos. Nowhere do we find in Poskim that Asarah B'Tevis is any different than Shavuos V'Dam Tzom Gedalyo. Tisha B'Av, yes. Tisha B'Av Leiloi Ki Yoimoi. Tisha B'Av has Chumras Yom Kippurim. Tisha B'Av is also by Surah Inuyim. So make Asarah B'Tevis Chomer, maybe even more than Tisha B'Av, or compared to Tisha B'Av. Chomer Tvei Mishavos V'Dam Tzom Gedalyo. Big Chiddush. Shuvas Maram Brisk was a contemporary of the Teres Chaim. Both were Gedolei Hungarian Gedolim. Shuvas Maram Brisk, Chele Gimel Semachov Test, brings this Chiddush, and he disagrees. So let's just summarize. So that Buddha seems to say, Asarah B'Tevis Chal B'Shabbos is not nidche, and therefore we fast on Shabbos. No other way to go about it. Be'etzem hayom hazeh. Basis of questions Abu Darham, Zuman, and I explained it's not similar to Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur Be'etzem Yom Hazeh is on the tzayim. Asarah B'Tevis Be'etzem Yom Hazeh is on the siege, because the Navi Yecheskel doesn't speak about fasting at all. Question number 2. The reason other tzayim are nidche is because probably the Nevi'im, when they were metaken tzayim, they were metaken lechatchila, that if and when these days will fall on Shabbos, they'll be nidche after Shabbos. Why would Asarah B'Tevis be an exception? And the third Gevaldige Chiddush is that there is such a thing to fast on Shabbos besides Yom Kippur. Which brings us to the famous question of the Minchas Chinuch. Minchas Chinuch Shin Aleph wonders, why, when Dalet Tzoymis fall on Shabbos, why does Shabbos have the upper hand and the Tzoymis are nidche? Oinig Shabbos is Divrei Kabbalah, not Min HaTorah. V'karoser l'Shabbos oinig u'legdoishech she'em mechubad is Divrei Nevi'im, so are Dalet Tzoymis Divrei Nevi'im. So what is the fundamental halacha when two mitzvahs clash and when they contradict one the other? And none could override the other, unlike asay doicha lo ta'aseh. Two mitzvahs asay stand once against the other. The basic halacha is sheval ta'isodif. So if a fast day falls on Shabbos and we contemplate, we have this dilemma what to do. To eat and be Makayim the mitzvah of Oinig Shabbos, or fast and be Makayim the mitzvah of Tzoyim, of Tanis. L'chayra, we should decide, Sheval Ta'isodef, don't eat. Divrei Kabbalah keneged Divrei Kabbalah. That's the question of the Minchas Chinuch. The Minchas Chinuch answers an amazing Chiddush. And his approach is that the Nevi'im weren't metaken Yemei Tanis, but rather Chodshei Tanis. The Lashon of the Novi Zechariah Perek Ches is Tzoyim HaRavi, V'Tzoyim HaChamishi, Tzoyim HaShvi, V'Tzoyim HaAsiri. Yiu leBeis Yehuda l'Sosin v'L'Simcha l'Moedim Tovim. So the Novi is referring to the months, 4th month, 5th month, 7th month, 10th month. It is only Divrei Soifrim. It is only the Chachomim that were metaken Yemei Tanis, not the Nevi'im. And that is why Oinig Shabbos, which is Medivrei Kabbalah, Divrei Nevi'im, overrides the mitzvah of Tanis, Yemei Tanis, are only Midrabanan. And some Achronim realized that we find this Chiddush in the Tashbates, Simen Reish, Ayin, Aleph. It's not only the Tashbitz, it's the Ritva in Masechet Tanis, towards the end of Masechet Tanis. But to me, this Chiddush always seemed to be so far-fetched. that the Nevi'im were metaken months and not days. So in Eretz Yisrael, in many schools and many yeshivik tanis and many kolelim, they have tests and they have Mivchan Amerikai. So Mivchan Amerikai means you have a question, you have 4 answers, and you need to choose which answer. But sometimes it also means you have 15 questions, and it's your choice. You only need to respond to 10 out of the 15, and you choose which ones you want to answer and which ones are exempt. To me, it's far-fetched than Nevi'im suggested. You need to fast any day you choose, Chodesh Av, any day you choose, Chodesh Tammuz, any day you choose, Chodesh Teves, and every person will choose another day. Extremely unreasonable. To me, it seems to be a milza de pshita that the Nevi'im's intention was that Kol Beis Yisrael is misabel biyachad. We all mourn together on the Churma Bayis. It's not reasonable that I will fast today and you'll fast tomorrow, and he will fast at the end of the month, in the beginning and the middle of the month. Unreasonable. So when the Navi says Somer Aviv et Somer Chamishi, I don't think that's a diak. So the Navi doesn't, once again, the Navi is not a Shulchan Aruch, it's not a Mishnah Brura. He's not teaching halachas. The context of this posuk is a positive one. The Navi promises that these tragic days of sorrow and mourning ultimately will be transformed to joy. L'yamei simcha, l'sosanu l'simchu l'moyadim toivim. So I don't think that's much of a diak that the Navi mentions the month. ואני הזדהיתי, אין כוונס הריטבו והתשבץ ככוונס המנחס חינוך. The Ritva and the Tashbitz deal with the question, what authority did Chachomim have after Chorban Bayis Sheni to move Shavuos B'Tammuz from Tishu B'Tammuz to Shavuos B'Tammuz? So Asarah B'Tevis, the siege was put on Yerushalayim, on the city of Yerushalayim. Shavuos B'Tammuz, the wall was breached. Tisha B'Av, the Heichel was reduced to ashes, and the Bayis was finally destroyed. Chorban Bayis Rishon was Tishu B'Tammuz. Chorban Bayis Sheni was Shavuos B'Tammuz. So in all the years between Chorban Bayis Rishon and Chorban Bayis Sheni, there was no Shavuos B'Tammuz, there was Tishu B'Tammuz. After Chorban Bayis Sheni, the fast day was moved over from Tishu B'Tammuz to Shavuos B'Tammuz. The Tashbitz and the Ritva deal with the question, Ein Beis Din yochel avatel divrei Beis Din chavere elu am ken godel mimenu b'chochma v'minyan. In the days of Chorban Bayis Rishon, there were Nevi'im. In Chorban Bayis Sheni, there were no longer Nevi'im. It was the tkufa of the Tanoim. And the Tanoim, as great as they were, didn't rise to the level of Nevi'ei Yisrael, who had revelation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu talked to the Nevi'im. So what authority did the Chachamim after Bayis Sheni have to alter and to change Konas HaNevi'im? The Tashbitz and the Ritva explained the Nevi'im didn't insist on the days, but rather on the month. But I don't think they mean to say that the Nevi'im didn't specify a day. Of course they specified a day, but they were Nevi'im, and they knew that it's not the end of the story, that there will be another Chorban. The Nevi'im were aware of Chorban Bayis Sheni, and they also were aware that the days will not coincide. They knew that Tisha B'Av will be the same, but they also knew that Bekiyas HaChoima will not be on the same day. So the Nevi'im, when they instituted Yemei Hatzam, and I stress Yemei Hatzam, days of mourning, the Nevi'im were metaken Yemei Tzam, not only months, and everybody choose whatever your day you want. No. The Nevi'im gave the opportunity and the liberty L'chachomim shel achreim, to play around with the days and to move the day from one to the other. So the Nevi'im were metaken, sort of a tevis, Shiva os, Tishu b'Tammuz, Tishu b'Av. But they were aware that b'Chorban b'Hashani there might be different days. There will be different days. So the days aren't ironclad. They're not chokuk b'sela. They gave authority to the Beis Shel Achreim to switch the days. That is what the Ritva and the Tashbetz mean. And that is not the Minchas Chinuch that argues that Yemei Atzam are Divrei Seifrim. Liyasef Divrei Minchas Chinuch, maybe there's room to argue. The mere fact that the Nevi'im gave the authority to Chachomim Shel Achreim to change the days, maybe already would mean that it is a lesser madrega and it doesn't have the chumrah of Divrei Nevi'im, and that is why Shabbos would override the days of Avelus. It's not what the Minchas Chinuch says, but it would be liyashiv devorav shelo yu taimeh. It would be my interpretation of the Minchas Chinuch's idea. So based on the Minchas Chinuch's approach, we could understand the Abu Darham. Regarding the other Soimeris, regarding the other fast days. So the Nevi'im gave later Doiris, later generations, later Chachomim the authority to switch the days, to transfer them from one day to the other. That is correct regarding the three other Tanis, but not Asarah B'Tevis, because Asarah B'Tevis, it is Be'etzem Hayoim Hazeh. And if we can't move Asarah B'Tevis to another day, then we need to decide which mitzvah overrides Oynik Shabbos or Tzaimois. Sheval Taisa Odef. And that is why we would fast on Asarah B'Tevis. So this would be a gewaltige pshat in the Abu Darham. For me, it's difficult to accept this pshat because I don't think the Minchas Chinuch is right. I think the pshat in Ritva and in the Tashbetz is like I explained. But I also gave a pshat in the Minchas Chinuch, which would substantiate the Abu Darham. So as I connected, I heard Rabbi Gottesman discussing the Or Sameach. So in my simon, I quoted the Or Sameach, and he wants to bring a raya from the Gemara to the Abu Darham from Erev and Daf Mem Aleph. I don't know whether Rabbi Gottesman discussed Reb Chaim Brisker. It's not in Reb Chaim al Rambam, but rather in the stencil. Reb Chaim's stencil, Ot Mem Daled, Reb Chaim offers another interpretation of the Abu Darham based on Simen Reish Peiches Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim. Tanis Chaloim. If a person has a terrible dream, a nightmare, frightening dream, Venafshoy Aguma Olav, he is distressed and he's worried. He could fast on Shabbos. And why is that? Because Yofa Tanis Lechaloim. How do we deal with dreams in our day and age? It's not our minhag to have Tanis Chaloim. Definitely not Shabbos, not even in the middle of the week. But many times I do Hatovas Chaloim. So in every siddur, you have the Nusach of Hatovas Chaloim. Person has a bad dream, he needs to assemble, put together 3 chaverim, people that love him, care for him, and they should say Hatovas Chaloim. It takes 5 minutes. And people call me all the time with bad dreams, and I do Hatovas Chaloim. The Chazon Ish totally disregarded dreams, and he was mezalzel. When people came to the Chazon Ish, he didn't do Hatovas Chaloim. He said, Chaloim is shav yedaberu, especially in our day and age. And the Chazon Ish said, you totally disregard your dreams, don't worry about anything. But most people are so troubled that I think, Eitz Taiva Kamashmalan, do Atovas Chaloim. But in days of yore, dreams meant more than they do today. Obviously, after so many years of Hester Purim, there is no Naviya, there is no Ruach HaKodesh, even dreams no longer mean anything. But the Gemara says, Yofetanis lechaloim, but it must be boy biyoim. In the very same day that you had that awful dream, you need to fast. And that is why, if you had a bad dream, Leil Shabbos, you fast on Shabbos. Why? Because you can't push it off. Fasting on another day wouldn't have the same effect. So Reb Chaim Brisker says, that is Pshat Dabud Aram be'etzem hayoim hazeh. Other tzaymis you could push off, not Sorah B'Tevis, because the Pasuk says be'etzem hayoim hazeh, and therefore it's like Tanis Chaloim. Wouldn't have the same effect any other day. Tzorach in Godel. So I think the stencil of Reb Chaim doesn't have the same significance as Reb Chaim al-Rambam. Reb Chaim al-Rambam stated that Reb Chaim wrote, that unbelievable giant wrote, stencil is a leket from Talmidim. Doesn't have the same significance, the same weight, the same importance. And I think it's a tzorach and godel because the reason one could fast Tanas Chaloim and Shabbos is because that is his Oynik Shabbos. In his place, in his situation, the way he feels, fasting would give him more comfort, more calm, and more serenity. That is his Oineg. As the Tur explains, as the B'si Yosef explains, that is Pshat in the Halacha. If we impose on him Oineg Shabbos, it'll only put him into greater stress. We need to give him the feeling that his bad dream is taken care of. It's alleviated. It's invalidated. He has nothing to worry. And that is why he fasts on Shabbos. So it is not that Etanis overrides Shabbos. No, Etanis never overrides Shabbos. The reasoning of Tanas Chaloim is Oinig Didei. The way he feels right now, eating would be Tsar, fasting would be Oinig. And Oinig Shabbos is relative, depends on the situation you are in. So we cannot prove from Tanas Chaloim that an other tzayim that cannot be pushed off would be Doiche Shabbos. Regarding the question of the Minchas Chinuch, why does Shabbos have the upper hand? Zemed divrei Kabbalah v'zemed divrei Kabbalah. Why don't we say Sheval Tasa Odif? To me, the answer is so simple, so pashut. And I mentioned it before. When Nevi'ei Hashem were metaken Dalet Tzaynis, Zecha L'Chorban Beis HaMikdash, they were aware that commonly these Tzaynis would fall on Shabbos. And what do we do then? We can't play around with Shabbos. Shabbos kavia v'kaim misheishis yimei bereishis. There is no Shabbos nidcha. So the Nevi'im lechatchila were metaken that we can't push away Shabbos, so we will move over the tzayim. This teretz is so pushed, so why doesn't the Minchas Chinuch say it? Whenever I offer a simple teretz to a kasha of great gedolim, I try to understand, am I smarter than them? Definitely not. So why don't they say it? I still insist what I say is right. But maybe the Minchas Chinuch didn't say the same because Tzayim Nidcha kal mit Tzayim she'eino Nidcha, and we are mekel by Tzayim Nidcha. If we would assume that the Tzayim Nidcha is also Tekonas Nevi'im, why would it have more kula? The same Nevi'im that said Tisha B'Av say Asarah B'Av if Tisha B'Av is Shabbos. The same Nevi'im that said you fast on Shavuos B'Tammuz say you fast on Yud Ches Tammuz if Shavuos B'Tammuz is Shabbos. So why would there be more room for leniency and kula? But I don't think that's really a powerful argument. After all, Nidche is Nidche. Yes, it's the same Nevi'im. But the Nevi'im decided Shavuos is the day and not Shmoina Asar. They decided Tisha B'Av is the day and not Asarah B'Av. Asarah B'Av is just a substitute. Yes, it is the same Nevi'im, but it's not the same day and it's not the same Tanis. So in my opinion, the answer to the Minchas Chinuch question is Poshet B'Tachlis Apshitis. It is the Nevi'im themselves that decreed and decided. Yes, if there is a contradiction between Oneg Shabbos and Tzom HaRavi, Tzom HaChamishi, Tzom HaShvi, Tzom HaAsiri, we decide to push off the fast day because we can't push off Shabbos. Coming back to the Abu Darham, after a discussion of 40 minutes, in which I follow in the footsteps of all the great Achrayim, all of them understood that the Abu Darham says a gewaldige Chiddush. In the days of yore, when there were Mekadesh Chodesh al Piriyah, if Asarah B'Teves fell on Shabbos, it's not Nidche. And they all understood you fast on Shabbos. Ibi d'Italia, I would say, lo ye'olo al datoi, that one fasts on Shabbos. There is no such a thing as fasting on Shabbos besides Yom Kippur. Like the Zemer of the Ibn Ezra, there is no such a thing as fasting on Shabbos besides Yom Kippur. If I would have my way, all the Abu Darham means to say, I'm just looking at my shir, exactly where do I write this? Well, okay. All the Abu Darham means to say, all the other tzomis are nidcha. Asarah B'Teves can be nidcha. So what happens? We don't fast. When Asarah B'Teves is Chal on Shabbos, there is no Asarah B'Teves. When Asarah B'Teves falls on Shabbos, we'll fast next year. The Abu Darham does not say when Asarah B'Teves is Chal on Shabbos, we fast. No. That is not even a Havamina. There is no such a thing fasting on Shabbos besides Yom Kippur. Shabbos overrides all the tzomis. All the Abu Darham means to say, other tzomis are nidcha. They're pushed off one day, and we fast Sunday. Asarah B'Teves can be pushed off. So there is no nidcha. So what happens? What do you mean what happens? Nothing happens. Fast next year. Fasted last year. Because Asarah B'Teves cannot be nidcha. And if it cannot be nidcha, then it's bottle. It's bottle, not nidcha. You never fast on Shabbos. And why is that? I just explained a few moments ago that the reason other tzomis are nidcha is because that was the Konas Nevi'im. If it wouldn't be for the Konas Nevi'im, maybe the Minchas Chinuch would be right. Sheval Taisa Odif. No. I really think that there's another reason Shabbos overrides tzomis. Because Shabbos is more important than tzomis. Oinik Shabbos might be Medivrei Kabbalah, but Shabbos is Menat Torah. And Shabbos is a day of Simcha. It's Mekroi Kodesh. Some Rishonim clearly say that Lechem Mishneh is Menat Torah. Sholosh Sudas is Menat Torah. Oinik Shabbos bebosa v'yayin, that is Midrabanan. Shuvas Arashba. There is an Issa D'Oraisa to fast on Shabbos. Even if there would not be an Issa D'Oraisa to fast on Shabbos. But Kedushas Hayoim is Menat Torah. So everything that fits in and supplements Kedushas Hayoim overrides Tzomis. Shabbos ikroi min haTorah. Dalet Tzoymis ikron midarabonon. So there are poshet asforos why Shabbos overrides Tzoymis. Not only what I argued a few minutes ago, because that was lechatchilat konos hanavim. Shabbos, according to most poskim, including Shulchan Aruch Harav, only Shabbos might be medivra Kabbalah. Fasting on Shabbos is an issur d'oraisa. But even if we would say, no, there is no issur d'oraisa fasting on Shabbos. Shabbos is ikroi min haTorah. Dalet Tzoymis ikron midarabonon. So coming back to my argument, and I feel amazed and humbled, because I don't think anyone said this up to the Minchas Osher. All the Achronim follow same path. According to Abu Darham, Asarah b'Teves falls on Shabbos, it's not nitcha, you fast on Shabbos. And I say, Asarah b'Teves falls on Shabbos, it's not nitcha, so it's bottle. Either it's nitcha or it's bottle. You don't fast on Shabbos besides in Kippur. What is the lashon of Abu Darham? Afilu hayuchal b'Shabbos loy hayu yecholen litchoyso liyoyim acher mepnei shenema bebe'etzam hayoyim hazeh kamoi b'yoyim haKippurim. So maybe the Achronim understood that we fast because he says kamoi b'yoyim haKippurim. Just like we're fasting in Kippur, we fast on Asarah b'Teves. But I say no, that is not necessarily his kavanah. Kamoi b'yoyim haKippurim she'eino nitcha, kach Asarah b'Teves eino nitcha. But Yom Kippur is min haTorah, so it's doiches Shabbos. Asarah b'Teves is midarabonon, it's medivra Kabbalah, so it's not doiches Shabbos. I b'didi Italia. And many times I apologize and I say, I b'didi Italia, v'lav b'didi Italia. But that is when my chiddush is nogei halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa botlu da'ati. We're not dealing with halacha l'maisa. This isn't halacha l'maisa because Asarah b'Teves never falls on Shabbos. And that is why I say, I b'didi Italia. My pshat in Abu Darham would be, Loi Ola al Datoi, that we fast on Shabbos. Shabbos overrides Tzoymis because Shabbos is Chomor Tfei Tzoymis. It's Ikroi min haTorah. And according to various different Rishonim and Achronim, it's an issur d'oraisa to fast in Shabbos. And some Rishonim say Lechem Mishnah is min haTorah. And Shalosh Shudas is min haTorah. We learn it from Parshas Haman. Even though Onik Shabbos is medivrei Kabbalah. Onik Shabbos is beyond not fasting. Onik Shabbos is la'aneges Shabbos, barburi misla v'dogim. So, after I spent 40 minutes following the footsteps of the great Achronim and offering different interpretations on the Abu Darham, so towards the end of this year, I must share with you my opinion. Lani is daiti. Lo yolo al datoi, that we fast on Asarah b'Teves shecharitz b'Shabbos. Pshat and the Abu Darham is very brief and very short. There is no Asarah b'Teves nitcha. And if Asarah b'Teves falls on Shabbos, there is no Asarah b'Teves because it's not nitcha. And if it's not nitcha, it's bottle. Kach nera la'ani is daiti. So, Friday, this week is a day of mourning. We had 8 beautiful days of light, Chanukah. That is Jewish life. From extreme to extreme, from joy to mourning. And Erev Shabbos we fast. And Shabbos, bo menucha. Shabbos will have Onig Shabbos, like any other Shabbos. And whenever I give a shiur, on Yemei Atzam, on days of sorrow, of mourning and fast days, I am always messiahing with a pasuk of the Navi Zechariah, which is a pasuk of hope and promise. It is the only place in Divrei Nevi'im where Dalet Tzoymis are mentioned, and they're mentioned as I explained before, in the most positive context. Tzoyim HaRavi v'Tzoyim HaChamishi, Tzoyim HaShvi v'Tzoyim HaAsiri. Yiyu lebeis Yehuda lesoson ulesimcha ulemoyadim toivim v'hu emes v'asholom ahevu. Have a beautiful day, and I hope to see you next week.
Before the Rav goes, could I ask the question about this year? Since the Rav Shita Mechadeshes would mean that there is no fasting, even according to the Vudraham. How does that have implications to the Shita Harav this year? And the Sarvateva is on Friday about eating after Shkia and not being mashlim till after Ma'ariv. Would this have implications of this yug and this question?
Well, that is a das yochid, man. But we, our minig and most poskim say that we are mashlim d'tzoim, and I don't think it necessarily has to do with the Abu Dharam. So according to what I say, Shabbos definitely would override sort of B'Tevis. So according to Abu Dharam, the Ravid wouldn't make much sense. But even according to my opinion, it's different. Shabbos overrides, but that doesn't mean that you need to be Mekayim the Mitzvah Voinik Shabbos or Simcha Shabbos the first moment. And that is why, la halacha, we do wait to Tzei Sakrechon.